Good evening and welcome to the 10 o'clock news. We are continuing our coverage of the US elections. The headline right now, this is neck and neck, but there seems to be a slight advantage in favor of Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden in the race to 270. Biden's at 253, Trump at 214, Biden 17 away from a win, Trump 56 away. The US race is now a razor's edge. The counting, let's just say, is painfully slow. Maybe the US could learn a thing or two from our Indian Election Commission. Such a huge country, and we usually get our results by 12 in the afternoon. Biden's path to victory depends on these states, Arizona and Nevada, who have 11 and 6 electoral colleges each. The lead for Biden is less than 1%, and that's really the big concern. In just a short moment, Vishnu will tell you the other side of the story as well as far as Trump is concerned, with very easy to understand graphics as to where exactly the situation is. But the matter has become complicated because of allegations of vote rigging. The fake date stamps that have been put allegedly to benefit the Democrats, that's the allegation. The matter could also go to the court. Let me now hand it over to my colleague Vishnu. Vishnu, can you tell us? Let's quickly take a look at this tweet, by the way. Vishnu, can you take us through? I think Donald Trump has tweeted.
All of the recent Biden claim states will be legally challenged by us for voter fraud and state election fraud. Plenty of proof. Just check out the media. We will win. America first. I'm not sure how much of the media has been reporting any of this voter fraud. There are a lot of people who actually say, Sanket, and this is really important, that voter fraud in the United States, if you look at past precedent, is almost, it's minute. There was a study which we actually had a point on a graphic yesterday which said 0.0009% evidence of fraud in the past. Whereas on this occasion, what Trump and his supporters are alleging are that there are foreign nationals who have been voting. There have been fake stamps which have been put, thereby making illegitimate votes legitimate. There have been people who shouldn't be voting. And therefore, there are a bunch of people. Yeah.
There's an allegation of dead people voting.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. I missed that. An allegation of dead people voting as well. But be that as it may, to assume that there is something of the scale to rig the entire election based on these votes, well, that's perhaps a stretch. At the moment, though, let everybody be very clear about this. This is neck and neck. There are a set of assumptions that Biden is actually going to win based on those counties in a couple of key states which are still voting, and those counties have traditionally voted blue, and they are also counting, for example, Philadelphia and Pennsylvania. They are also counting mail-in ballots, right? And mail-in ballots, it is believed, are largely in favor of the Democrats. So these are the states which are all important: Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Alaska. Let's bring that up full screen over here so that I can explain to you what exactly it is that we are talking about. Right. Arizona first. There is a small expectation that we will know very soon whether Arizona is going to be declared. Now, if you add up Arizona and 11 seats that it brings, along with Nevada and the 6 that it brings, if this were to go to the Biden camp, he's across 270, he wins the election. However, that is an assumption by itself, because the lead in Arizona, for example, there is no lead. It's Biden at 0.7%. It's less than a 1% lead, and Trump marginally beneath him. So for Trump, every single state matters, and Nevada is very important as well. Georgia as well, just look at that. Biden is under and Trump is up by just 0.4%, 96% of the votes having been counted. So these are very, very close, and therefore a lot of Republicans would say, look, how can you assume, for example, in the case of Pennsylvania with 20 seats, where Trump does have a 3% lead, that anything can be done by the Democrats to get them to the top? But as we've been arguing, there is solid evidence to suggest that a lot of the votes which are being counted, approximately 140,000 votes, would in fact go to Biden. That would be more than enough for him to change things over there. If Biden were to eventually win Pennsylvania alone with 20, he doesn't need any other state, he's through. But this is all in a conventional sort of sense. Let's go to the next graphic. This is all a conventional sort of thinking. This is going to go to the courts. But assuming for a moment that it doesn't, and Trump allows the process to go on without calling effectively for disenfranchisement, which is what he's been doing because he doesn't want a certain set of votes to be counted, then Trump would need to accept and get a win in Pennsylvania, Georgia, North Carolina, and Nevada. North Carolina, clear for him. The other 3 states are not clear for him at this stage, not at all. Certainly not in Pennsylvania. Georgia, simply too close at this stage for anyone to call. And Nevada, he's under at the moment, but again, it could go in his favor. Who knows? What's the path to victory for Biden? So the path to victory for Biden right now rests largely on the fact that he's done well so far with 253, relatively speaking. It's just the final bend that he needs to cross. And he would hope that he doesn't have too many reverses. He can afford 1 or 2, even at this stage, which Trump can't afford. And on the basis of what he's got so far, he'd hope that he'd win. So Arizona and Nevada, the sense is that he would possibly be able to pull through on these 2 states. That would take him to victory. And Pennsylvania, if that comes, then that would be huge. So what are the bookies saying? Let's just take a look at what the bookies have been saying today, because I don't want to tell you what they've been saying yesterday, because they've been all over the place. As of 9 p.m. IST, 88% say Biden, 12% say Trump, unless they change their minds once again. It appears, Sanket, that it's going to be Democrat. But again, it's not going to be declared, and Trump is not going to go shake Biden's hand. It's going to go to the courts, and the allegations which we've seen, including on some of our own programming, that's an indicator of where things will be.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Vishnu. It's interesting, and as I said at the very beginning, maybe they can learn a thing or two from our Indian Election Commission.
Electronic voting machine with paper trail. I mean, how simple is that?
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Vishnu, for that very detailed update of where US election counting stands as of this moment. I want to introduce our guest this evening. Suhasini Haidar, National Editor and Diplomatic Affairs Editor of The Hindu, is now with us. We also have David Byler. David Byler is a political columnist and a data analyst at The Washington Post. Thank you very much to the two of you. Suhasini, let's begin with you. I want to ask a very basic and fundamental question. Why does it take so long for this counting to take place in the United States of America? Why this unusual amount of delay?
Well, several reasons. The first is that actually because of the coronavirus pandemic and because Mr. Biden made such a push for his supporters to come out and vote early, which meant mail-in ballots, absentee ballots, plus early voting. That means voting before the day of actual voting, which is November 3rd. We actually saw up to 80% of the votes coming in some way or form through early voting. Now, every state in America has a different, different rule for this. But certain states like Pennsylvania were not even allowed to open the ballots until, the voting day had come, until voting had been done. So they have had to then sort out these ballots and start to count them. Tally the signatures with the signatures on the ballots and all the rest of this, of course, a lot of it being done by artificial intelligence. But that's why it is taking the kind of time it is taking. There are other states that did actually get a chance to sort out the ballots earlier. And those are the results we have actually seen already. So now we are down to about 6 states where we're waiting for those 6 states to be called. 3 in favor of Trump, 3 in favor of Biden. I think out of those 6 states, if you were to just look at, without getting into the numbers, because I know it is confusing after a point, It's just very simple. Without Pennsylvania, Mr. Biden still has a path to victory. Without Pennsylvania, Mr. Trump does not. So actually, it's all a question of whether those 2 states that could tip Mr. Biden over, Arizona and Nevada, actually now announce their results. And that's, again, another point that what we've heard from both the governments in Nevada and Arizona is not that they're going to announce their final tallies. They're still at about 84% each, I think. It is that they are going to give some kind of an update in the next hour or so. So for the last practically 12 hours, I think we've seen no updates over there. But there will be some updates announced, I think, within the next hour or so.
Okay. David, you know, a lot of allegations of vote rigging, fake date stamps. Now, I want to know from you, is there a mechanism to check this? Like, I can give you the Indian context here. You've got the Election Commission, you've got an electronic voting machine with a very strong paper trail. Of course, even that is put to question. But then there is a paper trail which matches your voting. It's done on a sample basis. What is the mechanism in the United States to be able to check on allegations of vote rigging?
Right. So the mechanism depends on each state. Every state is given broad leeway to conduct its own elections, to set up the rules for exactly how people can vote and, you know, all of their procedures around it. So there's not one specific centralized way in the United States. That being said, there have been systematic studies of voting in the United States, and none of them have found any sort of widespread fraud or any sort of widespread rigging. The elections in the U.S. are widely thought to be, you know, a clean process, not always the most timely in the count, but, you know, that's part of the deal you get when you allow people to turn in their mail ballots on election day and try to count more mail ballots than you ever have before. So really, so far, there's no evidence of vote rigging in the United States, and that's mostly misinformation that's been broadcast.
Very quickly, I wanted to ask you, since you're also a data analyst, David, fake news, fake narratives are spoken about a lot in swinging elections, in influencing the voter's mind. How much of that has happened or is still happening, if I may add, in the US elections?
Yeah, so there's a significant amount of misinformation and disinformation. Thankfully, the average voter gets most of their information from the more reputable sources in the United States. But studies do show that on sort of the far fringes of American politics, that misinformation can reign and that there are sources that are, you know, not fact-checked, that do not hold up under scrutiny, that have wide purchase on some of the far fringes of American politics. So it's definitely a factor, and it's especially a factor when the president is willing to tweet out information that is not correct or not true for his own purposes, and thereby give it legitimacy to in the eyes of some of his supporters.
All right. So, Asni, very quickly, a question on the Indian context. I was speaking to a very senior minister in the union government, and they seem to say that Biden could perhaps be bad news for India because he's not going to have that sharp a policy against China. They will be reconciliatory, and this will put India in some sort of a disadvantage. How do you look at India's relationship vis-a-vis a Biden administration or a Trump administration? And do you think that too much analysis on this is correct, or is the India and US relationship largely neutral to whoever is in power there?
You know, you have to admit that Mr. Trump is a unique leader. And I think many in India have seen some of the upsides of dealing with Mr. Trump, where he doesn't really care about precedent and about protocol and all of those things, dealing directly with India. And we've chosen in India to step aside, really set aside some of his insults, some of the tough talking he has done, and all the rest of that. As far as the India-US relationship goes, I think it's very clear that year on year, for the last 20 years at least, since the days of sanctions, India-US relations have improved regardless of who is in power. Republican, Democrat, Bush, Obama, Clinton, Trump. We've actually seen a strengthening of ties between the two countries. And to those who say that, Biden would be a bad idea, I would just remind them that 4 years ago, when it was expected that Hillary Clinton would come to power, most over here felt that actually a Clinton win would be in India's favor, and that the Obama-Biden years had been quite good for India. So I do think that there is a little bit of over-analysis going on. Where I think there is a difference is on political issues. Mr. Trump has chosen to give a pass or turn a blind eye compared to the Democrats when it comes to India's internal matters. Things like Kashmir, things like human rights violation allegations, things like communal riots, and even the CAA. Those are places the Democrats have already made statements.
Sure.
And it is likely that they will also be much more vocal about those. But otherwise, I think relations will be strengthened and are on a good path regardless of who comes to power.
Okay. So Asani, as well as David, many thanks for this quick analysis as we wait patiently, very, very patiently for these results to come in. Thank you very much to the two of you.